1,000,000-liter test sphere. It looks like a relic from another world. A 4-story steel orb, half buried behind chain-link fencing in Maryland. Locals call it the 8-ball. Once it was the beating heart of America's secret biological weapons program. A 1,000,000-liter sphere built to test the deadliest substances on Earth. The sphere, 131 tons of carbon steel, walls an 1.25 inches thick, was engineered to survive a biological bomb blast from the inside. In its hollow lung, clouds of pathogens once bloomed in controlled darkness. Anthrax, tularemia, Q fever, Venezuelan equine encephalitis. Here, in the heart of Fort Detrick, the air was weaponized. It began in 1942, when President Franklin Roosevelt quietly approved biological warfare research. What the public didn't know was that the Army's Chemical Warfare Service had already started experimenting in secret. The United States feared Nazi germ weapons, but it was Japan's Unit 731 that had perfected the art. After the war, American scientists granted those same Japanese researchers amnesty in exchange for data from more than 1,000 autopsies. The slides, the lab notes, the preserved biological samples, all of it ended up in Fort Detrick. By 1943, Camp Detrick had morphed from a sleepy airfield into the nerve center of U.S. germ warfare. Nearly 2,000 uniformed personnel worked behind barbed wire and blackout curtains in one of the biggest wartime research efforts outside the atomic project. Inside, anthrax was king, hardy, lethal, invisible. By the war's end, Fort Detrick had produced 5,000 bombs filled with anthrax spores, each one capable, in theory, of infecting entire cities if properly dispersed. Cold War models later estimated that just 100 kilograms of aerosolized anthrax, barely the weight of a grown man, could kill millions under the right conditions. The locals had another name for the place: Fort Doom. The 8-ball came online in 1950. Behind sealed steel doors, scientists in heavy rubber suits stood over animal cages and bacterial clouds. The sphere could simulate battlefields in miniature, an entire war zone in a bubble. Technicians observed how spores floated, clung to fur, or invaded lungs. It was the largest aerobiology chamber ever built, and the only one designed to detonate live biological munitions without releasing a single particle into the air outside. In 1954 came Operation Whitecoat, the most ethically tangled chapter in Fort Detrick's history. The Army turned to Seventh-day Adventists, conscientious objectors who refused to fight in the Korean War but agreed to serve their country through science. Over 2,300 volunteers inhaled metered doses of bacteria inside chambers like the 8-ball. They contracted diseases like Rift Valley fever, then were treated and studied as they recovered. None died. Some would later claim their bodies were never quite the same. Much of the technology pioneered inside the 8-ball, hazmat suits, decontamination showers, air filtration systems, became the foundation for modern biocontaminant labs. The same safety protocols that protected Cold War scientists from anthrax now protect Ebola researchers at the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases just down the road. The 8-ball hasn't been used since 1969, when President Nixon abruptly banned offensive biological research. Its building burned to the ground in 1975, leaving the orb alone, half-scorched, staring blankly at the sky. Today it sits fenced off and abandoned. Some say if you stand near it at night, you can hear a faint hum, like the slow breath of a living thing. Maybe it's just wind against metal. Or maybe it's the echo of something we made, and then tried to forget. Grid sphere. In July of 1966, something alien-looking appeared in the night sky. A metallic web, 30 feet wide, glinting like a ghostly cage in orbit. It wasn't a balloon, a rocket, or even a functioning satellite. It was hollow, an empty aluminum skeleton reflecting sunlight like a trapped star. The Air Force called it OV-18, or PASCOM-SAT, short for Passive Communications Satellite. But to those tracking it through their telescopes, it looked more like a shimmering cage for something unseen, an object that shouldn't have been able to stay aloft, yet somehow did, for 11 long years. OV-18 was born from a strange mix of thrift and ambition. By 1963, the U.S. Air Force had decided that space research was getting too expensive, too chaotic. To cut costs, the Air Force standardized small satellites and piggybacked them on test flights of the Atlas D intercontinental ballistic missile, or flew them on repurposed Atlas launch vehicles under a program called Orbiting Vehicle. Lieutenant Colonel Clyde Northcott Jr., a meticulous engineer with a flair for risk, oversaw the effort. Each launch carried a new puzzle into orbit, satellites built cheap, light, and strange. But none was stranger than OV-18. Goodyear Aerospace designed it not as a solid sphere, but as a delicate 30-foot lattice of aluminum wires, thin as thread, encased in a balloon made of polybutyl methacrylate, a plastic designed to vanish in sunlight. Once in orbit, the balloon would dissolve under the ultraviolet glare, leaving behind an open-grid sphere, a metallic ghost designed to test whether a hollow cage could bounce radio waves better than a mirror. When the Atlas D booster hurled it into the sky on July 14, 1966, its twin companion, OV-17, failed immediately. OV-18, however, inflated perfectly, shimmering above the Pacific, before shedding its outer skin like a chrysalis. Within a few hours, its plastic shell disintegrated, and the silvery cage took shape, 9 meters wide, weighing barely 10 kilograms. Despite its frailty, it reflected radio signals far better than a simple balloon. That contrast mattered, because an earlier satellite mission, Project Echo, had set the benchmark with a vast 100-foot Mylar Satelloon. Launched by NASA in 1960, it shone so brightly that people mistook it for a new star. Radio waves were bounced from Goldstone, California, off the Satelloon to Holmdel, New Jersey, marking one of the first two-way coast-to-coast satellite voice links. The same giant horn antenna in Holmdel would later detect the faint hiss of the Big Bang, the cosmic microwave background. But Echo's brilliance was also its flaw. Its immense surface caught sunlight like a sail, slowing it down until it fell to Earth. The Air Force's grid sphere, however, was different. Its open frame resisted atmospheric drag and reduced the solar pressure that had doomed Echo. It was, in essence, a mirror made of absence, reflective, resilient, and silent. For 11 years, the hollow sphere circled the Earth, a ghostly remnant of a forgotten arms race. Its orbit decayed slowly, until in 1978, it finally burned up, its wire skeleton glowing briefly before vanishing into the atmosphere. Losharik. The submarine was named after a toy, but built like a weapon from another world. Beneath its smooth black hull, 7 titanium spheres gleamed in the dark, welded together like pearls in a necklace. Each could withstand pressures that would crush steel and bone alike. This was Losharik, a secret Russian submarine so strange and so difficult to track that American intelligence called it a dark target. In July 2019, it surfaced in silence off the Barents Sea, smoke still rising from its hatch. 14 of its crew were dead. Losharik was never supposed to exist in daylight. Conceived in the 1980s and launched in 2003, it was part research vessel, part ghost ship, a deep-diving nuclear-powered craft run not by the Navy, but by GUGI, a shadow branch of the Ministry of Defense. Officially, it mapped the ocean floor. Unofficially, it was rumored to cut or tap undersea fiber optic cables, the arteries of the global internet, retrieve lost nuclear warheads, or install listening devices. Its name came from a Soviet cartoon horse made of juggling balls. But beneath the whimsical name lurked a design with sinister intentions. Each titanium sphere acted as its own pressure chamber, making the vessel capable of descending deeper than any U.S. Navy submarine, reportedly to 3.7 miles, over a mile deeper than the wreck of the Titanic. In 2012, Losharik publicly demonstrated its capabilities, operating under Arctic ice at nearly 2 miles deep to collect seabed samples, supporting Russia's extended continental shelf claim over parts of the Lomonosov Ridge. Some believed that it was also probing foreign sonar arrays and cutting cables along the way. Then, in 2019, disaster struck. While docking with its massive mothership, the Podmoskovia, a converted ballistic missile submarine, a lithium-ion battery caught fire. The batteries had been hastily developed after Russia's 2014 invasion of Ukraine, replacing the proven silver-zinc ones once imported from Kyiv. A single short circuit caused a chain reaction. One of the spheres became an inferno. The rest became tombs. Inside, 14 of Russia's best naval officers, 7 captains of the first rank, 2 national heroes, fought to contain the flames. They sealed themselves inside the burning compartment to stop the fire from reaching the nuclear reactor. When rescuers arrived, they found that the men had died of smoke inhalation, their last act saving the vessel from a potential reactor breach. At the funeral, an admiral said they had, quote, prevented a planetary catastrophe. Losharik and its mothership were towed back to Severomorsk under heavy guard, with satellite photos showing Podmoskovia in port with a tarp over its dorsal payload cradle. Russia said the Losharik could be repaired, and as of 2024, state media said work was progressing. However, a full return to extreme depth operations is uncertain. The U.S. Navy quietly began tracking its mothership again. Meanwhile, somewhere in a shipyard north of the Arctic Circle, the titanium spheres are being polished, reassembled, and made ready for another descent. Ultra-hardened command post. Beneath a quiet field near Zarinsk in Russia's Altai Krai region, an enormous concrete shaft descends into the earth. Its walls are smooth and ringed with scars. At the bottom, what remains of a massive spherical capsule rusts in silence, a relic of the Soviet Union's most terrifying secret, the dead hand. It was never meant to be found, and it was never meant to fall. Originally, the structure was known as a UKP sphere, or more precisely, KPVZ-15V-210, a highly protected command post for the 35th Rocket Division. It was part of a network of spherical command bunkers that Soviet engineers began constructing in the 1980s, ultra-hardened nodes designed to survive direct nuclear hits. Inside each sphere, a metal capsule hung suspended within a concrete shell, cushioned by enormous shock absorbers. It was rumored to be one of the most secret components of the Soviet perimeter system, known to the West as the Dead Hand, a place where men would sit in silence and wait for the end of the world. If the Kremlin was decapitated in a nuclear first strike, if communication lines were severed, and if sensors confirmed a nuclear attack on Soviet soil, 3 lights in the sphere would flash: authorization, decapitation, and confirmed detonations. Only then would the duty officers, buried more than 20 meters underground, initiate the command missile sequence and awaken the Dead Hand. Special command missiles would launch skyward, not to strike targets, but to scream launch codes across the ruined continent. In their silos, Soviet missiles would rise, blindly avenging a country that no longer existed. No one outside Russia knows whether those officers were meant to think or merely to obey. Some say they were a quote-unquote human firewall against total automation. Others believe they were little more than witnesses, guardians of the Dead Hand that could destroy the world long after its masters were gone. The facility in Altai was one of the last of these bunkers ever started. Construction continued even after the Soviet collapse, until the funds vanished and the soldiers left. When urban explorers found it in 2010, they discovered the ruins of something meant to be indestructible, a massive spherical capsule, 4 stories tall. Its interior flooded and gutted for scrap. In the tunnels, corroded blast doors hung open, their seals broken. Today, the sphere lies empty, its walls blackened by acetylene torches of scavengers. Yet deep beneath the Urals, its operational siblings still exist. Sealed, humming, connected to the invisible circuits of Russia's modernized perimeter system. In 2020, Vladimir Putin confirmed that work on a new, quote, absolutely secure nuclear command post was nearing completion. The shape, as ever, remains unknown, but those who remember the original spheres have no doubts. The golf balls. The Yorkshire moors are quiet, eerily so. Sheep graze along narrow lanes, the air thick with mist and silence. Then, on the horizon, a line of massive white spheres rises from the green hills like an alien colony. Locals call them the golf balls. Officially, this is RAF Menwith Hill. Unofficially, it's the quietest switch in a global kill chain. Once known by the codename Field Station 8613, it was built in the 1950s to monitor Soviet signals during the Cold War. Today, it's something else entirely. The largest known overseas spying base of the U.S. National Security Agency. 37 giant radomes, fiberglass shells that hide satellite dishes, now stand watch, their antennas eavesdropping on data as it beams between satellites. Their smooth white surfaces don't just protect against the weather. They conceal the direction of the antennas, keeping secret which satellites and whose conversations are being tracked. Inside the domes, technology hums at a scale that defies comprehension. Menwith Hill systems can intercept more than 335 million records. Calls, emails, GPS pings in just 12 hours. One of its surveillance missions, codenamed Moonpenny, monitored 163 different satellite data links at once. The base funnels that torrent of information to vast data centers, including one built in 2012 with 182 miles of cabling, enough to stretch from New York to Boston. Officially, Menwith Hill's purpose is communications research. In reality, it's a listening post for a global network that includes sites in Australia and the US, all part of a system known as Echelon. Its operators, some 1,200 Americans and 600 Britons, work behind layers of security, from armed guards to motion-detecting fences. Few locals ever get close enough to see the warning signs that mark its perimeter. In 2008, NSA Director Keith Alexander visited the base and issued a challenge that became a surveillance nightmare, quote, "Why can't we collect all the signals all the time?" Menwith Hill took him at his word. The base soon became home to Ghost Hunter and Ghost Wolf, programs that could locate a person anywhere on Earth the moment they connected to the internet. Within minutes, a drone could be in the air. Through these systems, Menwith Hill aided thousands of capture or kill missions in Iraq, Afghanistan, and beyond. Documents leaked by Edward Snowden revealed that its data guided U.S. drones in Yemen and Somalia, places where no war had been declared. A single operation tracked a Taliban unit via a satellite internet cafe, ending with, quote, approximately 30 enemies killed. But not all the dead were combatants. Between 2010 and 2020, more than 14,000 drone strikes and covert missions killed up to 16,900 people, including many innocents. Yet, British officials still refuse to confirm what happens behind those white domes. Today, some of those spheres serve a new purpose, scanning the heavens for missile launches as part of the U.S. space-based infrared system, linking Yorkshire directly to America's Space Force. The sheep still graze behind them. The hills remain silent, and above it all, the spheres stare on, watching, listening, remembering everything. Who would you trust more in a dead hand system today? A modern AI system or 2 humans buried in a sphere underground? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching Dark 5. Like and subscribe to continue exploring the greatest mysteries of this world and beyond.